Hi, welcome to the last of the 4 videos that I'm hoping you'll be able to view before you go in to teach in prison this semester. So this video is called I'm in the Prison, What Do I Do Now? And I'm conceptualizing this as an introduction to you setting the norms as opposed to just learning the norms of the prison. So one of the things that I talked about in a previous video was the fact that there's a tension between the norms of CDCR and the community college norms, and that one of the goals is to learn those norms. But what I want to do is posit here to you that one of the goals of quality teaching in prison is to actually both learn norms while creating norms, because that's how you use and practice your authority in the prison. So the goals for Los Rios program and faculty is for you to stay safe. This is a high priority that we obviously have, and that safety is holistic. So that is both your physical safety, but also relational safety, emotional safety. And that's part of what you learn in asserting your authority and power in the classroom, and in that using and creating, maintaining norms is part of what helps create that safety. So as you're in the prison, one of our goals is that you stay focused on providing that quality education. So you will be learning and adapting to the norms, and as long as that adaptation doesn't significantly impact the education, but at the same time, you're creating these norms for learning. And what I'd like to do is talk in this video about some of those norms that you will be creating. So first, norm number 1 is stay safe and be prepared. So please remember, you're a college professor. I doubt that you're going to forget that. But sometimes I want to also remind faculty you are teaching in a prison. This is one of those tensions, I guess I could have put that on here, that we work to dignify and honor and respect our students as students. And at the same time, we need to be mindful of the fact that we are teaching students who are incarcerated. So part of this is to make sure that you are learning those norms and aligning to the norms of prison. And there are some specific safety measures that you want to align to. So over on the left-hand side of the screen here, you will see the whistle that I have here. You're going to keep that whistle on your personhood where you can readily get to it. You can try taking the whistle, which we provide for you or the prison provides for you, and you just try sometime out in front of your house or somewhere not in the prison and blow it. And it is very loud. My niece and nephew did it recently and had a very good time with it. Keep it on you at all times. It will allow any correction officers that are close to you to come running because they will hear it. If they hear it, they will come running. The other thing is that in the prisons currently, you are getting chits. They're being made for you. You'll notice down here in my second picture is a picture of a hand holding a brass, what this picture is calling a brass tag. That will have your name on it. And what you will do is you will exchange that for an alarm when you go into the prison, and then you will give them the alarm back and you will get your chit back when you come back out of prison. This is the process that you will go through every time to have the alarm. So you need to get that alarm. Located beside this picture of a chits is an alarm case. So Los Rios has alarm cases to provide for you. You will get an alarm in the prison, and you need to keep that alarm on you at all times. When you press that alarm, correction officers will come running from all over the prison yard that you are on. So if there is a safety, and if you feel like that there is a safety concern, you press that alarm, they will come running. A couple of us have pressed that on accident over the course of time that we've worked in the prison. And for me, the first time that I pressed it on accident, I was like, before I even got to the door of the classroom, they had come running off of the prison yard. They had unlocked the doors, come into the building, and they were there. And I was like, well, what's going on? The students were like, you pushed your alarm. And I was like, oh no, I didn't even know that I pushed my alarm. Make sure you put it in the case. If you put it in the case, you won't have that problem. I was carrying it in my pocket, and it got knocked because it wasn't in the case. So make sure you have your alarm. The MOU between us and between your faculty union and Los Rios Community College District, as well as the MOU between the State Chancellor's Office and the Department of Corrections, indicate that an officer will be present. So a correction officer must be present when you are teaching. That means that they must be in the building. They don't necessarily have to be in the physical room that you're in, but they must be in the educational building where you are. So this is the norm that I want to talk about, which is that the officer must be in the building. This is very, very important. One, this is safety and security. Faculty do not have keys, so you can get yourself in and out of any of the buildings. Once you're in a building, the only way you can get in the building is if either the post-secondary educators allow you, let you in, or if a correction officer lets you in. Please do not go into an educational building and allow anyone to let you in that is not the correction officer that is actually going to be there while you're teaching. So I've had it before that I was standing on the yard and a correction officer saw me and said, hey, do you need to get in the building? And then they opened the door. Well, they could open the door, but then how am I going to get back out if they lock the door? You need to only be in the building when a correction officer is there, because they're the ones that have the ability to let you in and out with the keys. So please make sure that you are following this. The link to the MOU between Los Rios's faculty, LRCFT, our faculty union, and our district is linked in this, on this slide. So the officer will be in the building. Where will the officer be? Well, that's variable. It kind of depends on how the educational building is set up. So one of the things you want to do is make sure you know where that officer is going to be. It also varies according to who the officer is, because sometimes there's rotating officers in the building. However, the officer should be there the entire time that you are teaching. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. So what should you do with this officer that's there? Well, communicate with them, talk to them. They're a professional. They may have different norms and their job is different than yours, but they're a professional. Build some rapport with them, talk to them. And at the same time, it's your job to maintain your educational norms in your classroom. It's their job to maintain their Department of Correction norms. And so there's times where you have to work out that potential tension. We'll be talking about that throughout the semester, and we still bring that. People bring that to the professional learning community. They're like, hey, I had this conversation with a correction officer. I wasn't sure how to handle it. And they'll bring it to another colleague or to the professional learning community, and we talk through these things. So if you're not quite sure how or what to do in response to a correction officer, go ahead and bring that to us and we will talk through that. So here is the question. What if a correction officer is not in the classroom? Don't go into the classroom, don't go in the building, do not hold class. You need to leave the prison or leave the prison yard. And then you need to call me and Molly and let us know. If a correction officer, it's highly unlikely we're going to be able to get a correction officer there. If you've waited like 5 or 10 minutes before class started and they're still not there, if you've checked in the prison and they're not coming, then it's likely that somebody made an error and for some reason they're not going to be there for their shift. If that happens, you don't have to go back in there. You're not going to teach class that night. You will be paid. But what will happen is that Molly and I will be having conversations with the associate wardens and with the captains, the associate wardens, and the wardens to make sure that that doesn't continue to happen. And what you can do is ask for a follow-up with us to make sure that we've gone through the proper channels to ensure that that's not going to happen again. I want to just say really clearly that sometimes we hear that faculty got the building open and they taught with the building open and they were like, it was fine. There was no correction officer around. And I was like, no, it's not fine, because we have an agreement that that's not going to happen. And we can't push on the wardens and make sure that it doesn't happen if you still hold class. So I will say again, do not hold class. If a correction officer leaves while you're in the middle of class and they're the only correction officer in the building, you're also going to need to dismiss your class and leave. So please let us know if things like this are happening, and we will be getting with the wardens and the associate wardens and the captains to prevent those things from occurring. We did not have any problems last semester, but in the past we have had some problems with this. So it requires faculty communication to prevent it from being a problem. All right, so another set of boundaries. So I want to say that part of the tension of setting boundaries and maintaining boundaries for faculty, I think part of the tension is the boundaries that we set in prison are different than the boundaries that we set on campus. And I think this can be difficult for faculty. They just want to come in and do the same thing that they've done on campus. But context and culture is different in prison, and context and culture matters. So please try to learn and then set boundaries. You can't just kind of go with whatever flow happens. You actually need to set some boundaries. So one of those boundaries is about personal physical boundaries. There should be no touching between you and students who are incarcerated. It is a professional expectation there that there is 3 feet space between you and other people, or like an arm's length of space. So students know this. If I'm walking through a classroom and the desks are tight, or the seats are tight, I'll just say, hey, I'm coming through. Can you all move? And they'll move. So remember, there's no need to be shaking students' hands. They have told me before that they're uncomfortable when people initiate being in their physical space because they're used to not shaking hands. They're used to that physical space. So you don't want to breach that norm either with them unless you let them know you're breaching the norm. So at the end of a completer ceremony, for example, with Los Rios, I said to the students, I said, hey, I would like to shake your hands excuse me, sorry about that. I'd like to shake your hand as a gesture of just, congratulating you for completing our program. If that's okay with you, I checked with each of them and then I shook their hand. So I wasn't invading their space. So it may be normal for me to shake a student's hand or to be close to them, closer than 3 feet. That might be a norm on campus. That is not a norm in the prison. So you're going to want to make sure that you stay within that arm length distance and that you are aware of your physical space and how close you get to them while you're teaching. One of the suggestions that I have for faculty is that if possible, you can place your body and the items that you're carrying, you can place that behind a desk or behind a platform or like if there's a podium, behind a podium, like a teaching lectern or behind a table. If you put that behind you and you stand if you stand behind that while you're teaching, it can create a natural 3 feet barrier that can make it comfortable for you and make it comfortable for the students. If you're a faculty member that likes to walk around in class a lot, I would ask you to be very mindful of the way that you transition that norm to the prison. So you want to think about that. You want to spend some time assessing whether or not that's making you comfortable and the students comfortable and whether that's best for that environment. So please be very mindful of the physical space in the classroom and the items that you take in. In the last video, I talked about contraband. So you're going to need to find a place to put your items so that they're not physically accessible to students either. So that way your items, as well as the items that you want to give back to them or collect from them, you'll need to decide where they can be in the room. And each classroom will be a little different. So you'll want to discern and figure that one out as you set and maintain the boundaries in your class around personal physical space. So the other boundary that you are going to want to set is that students need to stay in the classroom. So according to the prison, when students are in class, that's where they are. If they look them up, that's where they are. And unfortunately, unlike students on campus, students in the prison are surveyed, right? Like people know that they're under surveillance. People want to know where they are at all times, and where they are in the prison is important to the prison. So this is one of the norms that we respect as we are in the prison teaching. And so students need to stay in your class when they're in class. This affects institutional count and other things if we don't know where students are. So please encourage students to go to the bathroom before and after class or on scheduled breaks. If you're teaching at Folsom Prison, it's like the Folsom prisons have 3-hour classes. So however you're going to work out scheduled breaks. Even in those long classes, do not let students just randomly walk and leave your class. So you have to pay attention to what's going on in the hallway, or where they are, or if they're around the hallway, 10 minutes they've been gone. And then all of a sudden you have a safety and security or a discipline concern because now they're out in the hall. Potentially there might be drug activity, sexual activity, other things like that that could be, I'm not saying it will be going on, I'm saying that it could be going on. And perception is part of the problem. So please encourage students to go before and after class or during scheduled breaks and talk to the post-secondary educator or the correction officer that's on duty there about the norms around breaks for that particular prison yard or that particular prison. If there are exceptions to these things, make sure that you know based on the people who you are working with, like I said, the post-sec or the correction officer. And if a student needs to leave your course, so for example, let's say they have paperwork that says that they have a doctor's appointment or something like that, you need to let whoever the CDCR employee is who's in that building, whether it's the correction officer or if the post-secondary educator happens to be there at that time, you need to let them know that the student is leaving. We can't just have students just randomly wherever because it's a prison, right? And because students who are incarcerated are again under surveillance, and the Department of Corrections needs to know where they are. I'm not suggesting that it's your job to survey them, but what I am, is that a word? I don't know if I'm using that correctly. So correct me if I'm wrong when we meet up to talk about this video, but if that's the wrong use of that word, let me know. But I am suggesting that when they're in your class, that that the agreement that we have with the prison is that they're in our classes, right? And so that's our job then, is during that time to keep them in our classes. So the other time is that, or the other boundary, in addition to physical space, in addition to keeping students in class when class is going on, the other boundary that you want to set and maintain is, sorry, I have lost your, so the other boundary that you want to set and maintain is your use of class time. Class time is limited. You will find that there may be things in the prison that cause class time. There might be a disruption, or class might start late because of something that you have no control over. And because of this, when you actually get the students there, you've got to start on time, end on time. And if there are stragglers, you have to decide, are there enough students missing that I need to wait, or shall I just get going? And then once class starts and you have that class time, use it well. Use it within your style, but use it well. You will notice that as in all classes, some students will want to talk a lot. You're going to need to manage that. You're going to need to set and maintain boundaries around who talks, that when they talk, how much they talk. You'll want to invite multiple voices into the course, into the classroom. You're going to also want to help students stay focused on what's going on in the classroom in case there are any distractions, which at times can happen, although as a rule, we haven't had a lot of that problem. So please make sure that you're aware of the use of class time and beginning and ending class on time, especially the ending of class on time. So this slide was really difficult for me to do. It's one of the reasons why this video took a lot longer to record than I had planned. The reason it's hard is because we should probably have like a discussion about it. I'm not really quite sure how to do a slide on this issue of maintaining professional relationships and avoiding overfamiliarity. So first I want to say that this emphasis on overfamiliarity is very important to the Department of Corrections. This is the norm that they have. And at the same time, it is an important concept for the work that we do. So the other piece of the tension, I think, for me in doing this slide is the fact that I know that the idea of quote unquote professionalism is embedded in like racism, classism, sexism, like this idea of what does it even mean to be professional has lots of cultural norms embedded in it. So I'm not using the term lightly. And at the same time, I think that we all have a sense of what it means to be professional when we're working with students. What I don't think we all have is an idea of what it means to be professional as prison college professors, or as college professors teaching in prisons. And I think that that's part of what we're all learning. And this is, in this program, why it's so important that we'll work together to understand this. So what I would like to do, though, is talk to you a little bit about why this idea of maintaining professional relationships and avoiding overfamiliarity and avoiding the perception of overfamiliarity. I would like to explain to you why this is so important. So first, it is about safety for faculty and students. For faculty, it does keep you safe when students do not perceive that they're able to hook you, manipulate you, or they're able to, or that they see you playing favorites in the classroom. This, for whatever reason, students who are incarcerated, as a rule, doesn't mean all of them, as a group, as a rule, seem to be more aware of this and more aware of perceptions of favoritism. In addition to that, correctional officers, the Department of Corrections, they're watching very carefully for any kind of perception of overfamiliarity, of manipulation, of professionalism gone awry, because what they're trying to do is avoid risk. They don't want you to be harmed. They don't want a slippery slope of you being manipulated. They don't want you doing anything illegal or you getting talked into doing anything illegal, like bringing in contraband, taking out contraband, or other ways in which people have been harmed or have been compromised in their relationships with people who are incarcerated. And so the Department of Corrections does extensive training on overfamiliarity. And so they are very attuned to this. That's part of their norm, is to watch and pay attention to it. And so there's a lot of tension around this because the CDCR's definition and emphasis is very different than the college's definition of even what a professional relationship looks like. And that idea of a professional relationship, we have a lot of autonomy as professors on campus. That's going to look very different in the facility. So there's a lot of tension here. So I'm going to give you a few beginning ideas on what to do with this, but this issue of overfamiliarity is going to continue to come up as you grow and learn to be a professor who is teaching in the carceral system. So first, one of the ways that I think that we protect against the perception of overfamiliarity is by using professional titles. I talked about that extensively in one of my previous videos. The other thing is that a hard and fast line is do not be alone in a classroom with a student. So not only can this cause the perception of overfamiliarity, it can also cause accusations of sexual misconduct, of concerns that you've taken something that you shouldn't have taken from a student or given something that you shouldn't have. The student can be at risk of being punished by the Department of Corrections. It could be something perfectly innocent, but that does not mean that there may not be consequences for you or them. If the Department of Corrections decides that you are a problem, they can just decide you're not going to be teaching there anymore. That doesn't mean that you won't be employed with Los Rios, but it may mean that you can't get into the prison anymore. And if you can't get in, you cannot teach. So do not be alone in a classroom with a student. What I do is if I have a student lingering after class who has a question, I pay a lot of attention to what's going on as students are leaving the class. I try to just, get them to all leave at the same time. But if someone says, hey, I got a question, Dr. Jones, and I say, okay, I need someone to stay here because I got someone who has a brief question. And then I do a brief question, and often I'm walking out with at least 2 students at a time as we walk down the hall with the correction officer to leave the building. So another way to avoid overfamiliarity is not disclosing personal information. And I talked about that in one of my other videos as well. Disclose enough information that it's relevant to whatever's going on in class, to use examples, etc. But there's no need to disclose a lot of personal information. And if you're feeling some kind of way, like this student wrote this note to me, or there seems to be something coded in this assignment, or something was said to me and it made me uncomfortable, then just we'll talk about it. It's not all that deep. This is where the authenticity is important. So when I was in my PhD program, I my background is in psychology. So I was trained as a therapist, right? So in my PhD program, I was studying to be a psychologist, and some faculty, probably in an ethics course, I don't even remember where. It might have been in a supervision course. I don't even know what course it was. They just said, it's very possible that at some point in your career, it happens to almost everyone, that you will be sexually attracted to a client. And I was like, oh, this is interesting, right? So here we are. I'm like listening to this. I'm like, oh. And they said the issue is not whether you're attracted to a client. The issue is, what do you do when that attraction occurs? Because what will happen is the attraction will then be thoughts about the student. Then it'll be special treatment to this, to not the student, special treatment to the client. Then you'll be thinking about the client all the time. Then you're doing extra special things before the client comes in for their sessions. And then pretty soon you're on that slippery slope toward the ethical, in my field, the ethical violation of having sex with a client when you're a therapist. And it's still an ethical violation, that the most common ethical violation. So I'm telling you all this to normalize the fact that things begin when you feel some kind of way, when you're uncertain. And that's often not the problem. That's just when the slippery slope is introduced. No one slid down the slippery slope when it's introduced. The stress and the difficulty and the emotional angst that will come as you're slipping down the slippery slope, that I don't want for anyone. So please, I find some people in this network you can consult with. If it's not me, if it's not our director, Molly, then hopefully you'll find some other faculty. And this issue of overfamiliarity, if things feel not right, please just talk to people about it. Hopefully we continue to build a network where people feel comfortable. I believe we have that. I believe it will continue. So what other norms should I create in the classroom? And the answer is many. In some ways, creating healthy norms for education, creating purposeful, intentional norms for learning is I think, a large portion of what we do in our work, both in and out of the classroom. So I left out a lot of stuff. I didn't talk about class discussions or topics or the tone you make in assignments or how you give feedback or what do you do when students want extra information. There's a lot of things I didn't talk about. So some of these you'll learn over the course of time that you're there, that you're teaching. Some of them you'll bring to our professional learning community. Some of them will have more training for you as new faculty. You'll receive compensated training throughout the semester. But the goal is that as you experience this tension, which tension to me is just the discomfort often involved in growing and learning, you're going to be experiencing this type of tension that's involved in finding your style and adapting your teaching theory for the students, the class, the prison, and the yard that you're teaching on. And I would even posit to you that whatever you learn more about yourself as an educator in the setting will translate to the work that you're doing in other places. For me, it translates back to the teaching that I do for students who are on campus. Your norms will evolve as you grow. So what I advise you to do, and again, this is my advice, is to be aware, to be explicit with those norms as opposed to allow them to only be implicit, which is often what happens with norms, and be intentional. So be purposeful, deliberate in the creation and in the maintenance of norms in your work. So the takeaway for this video is that as you continue to learn the prison norms, you also need to set norms for safety and for quality learning in your classroom. So please remember to maintain your agreed upon safety measures, to set and maintain boundaries in the classroom, to avoid overfamiliarity, and to be intentional in creating further instructional norms. We'll use some of the questions here when we meet for discussion.